Hi, I'm going to show you today the number one, the best method of new technology to measure your uric acid. And so why would you want to measure your uric acid? We're going to cover that too. But I just want to get the point across that data is important. You've seen me go through labs, you've seen me go through genomic stuff. You know, data, you don't have to be as comprehensive as all the things that I wish everybody would do, but you need to do something. And so the category of technology of home meters, home monitoring, is really starting to become pretty ingenious. I was about to say explode, but I don't think it's that big yet. And so this is a meter. They contacted us and they happened to see some of my uric acid videos and said, you know, I think you'd be interested in our meter. So what I like about their meter is that it measures uric acid, obviously. It measures glucose. It measures ketones, and it measures cholesterol. So it gives you a little context. And having the context, and you've heard me say this before, context is really important. Data is contextual, right? It gives you an idea of how are we doing. So we'll get into that, but I really want you to look at the ability to take uric acid at home in the context of these others. So this is far better than just a glucometer, which is about glucose, far better than just a ketometer, which is about ketones. And those two together are wonderful. And the Keto Mojo has that, and that's great. This is far beyond Keto Mojo. This has cholesterol and it has uric acid, which is really, really important. Kind of the test we're all waiting for is at-home insulin test because it's too expensive and it's just not a quick and easy test. I've talked to manufacturers about this. It just hasn't happened yet because it's really too difficult. So uric acid for many people is on par. And we'll talk about this a little bit. That's on par and it's a surrogate. You can use this instead of insulin for most cases. So let's get to it. So the number one way to measure your uric acid is together with glucose, ketones, and cholesterol. And let's get into why you need to. Okay, but first, why you would want to measure your uric acid with ketones and glucose and cholesterol. Well, one is, I'm going to keep this pretty simple, it's all about cognitive impairment. So whether you're 12, 24, 40s or 50s, thinking about yourselves and where you are in life as an older adult, meaning your 60s and 70s, your own cognitive health, or maybe it's your parents and grandparents. And you want to say, how do I look at where I am on this progression of maybe cognitive impairment? So I'm going to go into that. So this is cognitive impairment starts off with mild cognitive impairment. And then it gets stronger into dementia. And after dementia, it usually goes into Alzheimer's. The majority of dementia incidents evolve into Alzheimer's. That's why Alzheimer's is so big, a subset of dementia. Also, who is this for? Metabolic flexibility. Metabolic flexibility, Ernestine Shepard is the model for being metabolically flexible, being healthy. So the opposite, which is what I really didn't want to get into the negative of it, is being diabetic, obese, and, you know, being a carb eater, if you will, but that's many roads that get there. So it's the opposite of Ernestine. She's metabolically very flexible, and I think she's 86 or 87 now. Mind-blowing, mind-blowing, wonderful woman. Wish I met her. Okay, the third is really all about arthritis. Gout, more specifically, gout is correlated with certain levels of uric acid, and guess what? Some people don't get gout and their uric acid's very high. So it's really about dementia or cognitive impairment, cognitive health, and metabolic flexibility for them. But there's a major category. Gout is the fastest increasing in terms of per capita kind of arthritis in the world. And we'll get into a little bit of that. And that can get into even greater forms of arthritis. Usually they go together. So the first thing is I want you to know is that the correlation of serum insulin, this isn't that old, serum insulin and serum uric acid, 2013, saying they're basically on par with the same thing. So with glycated A1C is what that is in patients with type 2 diabetes. So it's really helpful. Uric acid is far cheaper test than hemoglobin 1AC. And you don't have to go, if you take this at home, you don't have to go to the lab to get your insulin or your hemoglobin 1AC down. So the conclusion was, in the present study, it was concluded that serum uric acid levels linearly increased with increasing serum insulin levels in newly diagnosed diabetic patients. Therefore, uric acid serves as a potential biomarker of insulin metabolism. So really, the story behind all that I've covered before is when you're looking at things like glucose, elevated glucose, of course, elevated fructose, which impairs your liver. Those are directly increase your uric acid, directly increase your insulin, and directly cause diabetes and certainly obesity. So serum homocysteine level, which we've talked about many times before when we went over labs, is positively correlated with serum uric acid. We talked before about how homocysteine is correlated with declining elevated homocysteine is correlated with declining cognitive health. We've seen that in the English Alzheimer's dementia studies, homocysteine, all the factors, the methylating factors of the B12, the folate, they used folic acid, the SAMe and beta-ene, choline for sure, which is the mother of the latter two, really have to be on board. You need to have enough of those. You can't have a lot of them. You need to have enough of them to keep your homocysteine down, because when homocysteine gets to be too high, it becomes a neurotoxin, hence dementia, hence mild cognitive impairment, hence Alzheimer's. So that was done on, the interesting thing about this one is this was done on, the correlation was with boys over the age of 17 and with a lower BMI, in other words, non-obese, and lower GFR, which is glomerular filtration rate. So what factors affect your uric acid? Well, as I just kept mentioning, is you're getting a fatty liver. We've talked all about that with choline. You're getting obese. So that's really about type 2 diabetes. There's not always correlated, but for the most part they are. So you have to watch that. And you have to look at that. So you're probably already, if you're this guy, you probably are pretty familiar with your labs already, and uric acid is high. So having this for you at home, tracking it, is going to be a windfall. Aspirin, as much as people get headaches and so on and so forth, and they're just going to take an aspirin, aspirin is salicylic acid. It is directly hurtful in terms of impairing your kidneys and therefore reducing their ability to excrete uric acid, and it's going to shoot it up, and it's going to cause anything from cognitive impairment, compromised liver, compromised pancreas, and most likely gout. And diuretics, anything that dehydrates you. So diuretics are given usually for hypertension, and they put a strain on your kidneys. But with all this flushing out of water, for the most part, some electrolytes, it's going to drive up your uric acid, and therefore it causes that. So it has compromised your ability to get rid of it, and therefore it's going to cause a problem. Coffee. Is coffee good or bad? We'll leave that one up in the air. So all the soft drinks of the world, clearly that's your fructose, and it's your sugar, and here's your refined carbohydrates, it's your sugar, your glucose, purines in general. You'll see some better pictures. Here's purine, here's beer. This is alcohol and purine, so it's the worst of the alcohols to have if you're going to be worried about your uric acid. And here's oysters, Wellevate oysters from Cape Cod. Seafood in general is not great, nor is organ meats, but let's get to it. Most likely you've been told, people will say, well, you know, I don't know, but I'm just saying you might want to consider decreasing some of these. Okay, so I did an entire playlist on this. Just go around briefly, the curse of keto and carnivore, 5 critical factors that affect your uric acid. Don't let purines limit your health. Stop chasing your uric acid. There's a lab. Gout and high uric acid. So we put that together. There's a lot of information we covered on it. It's really important. I'm not going to go that depth here. But gout from high purine foods. High purine foods are organ meats. So that's your liver, what they call sweetbreads, which is your thymus, your kidneys for sure. There's your beer, there's your alcohol, there's your acidic foods here. And things like sausage. So what is sausage? Sausage is animal meat, of course, that's been partially dehydrated and cured. And that, there again, that makes it a really high concentration of purines, which are the breakdown proteins of the nucleic acids, really. And that's why things like sardines that come in the can, they're actually dehydrated. I know they're in oil. They're dehydrated, so they're more concentrated, but that's seafood for sure. Seafood is generally more concentrated. It's not a very fatty form of food. So seafood is less fatty than terrestrial animal food, like your poultry and game and so on and so forth. So once you get into seafood, it's about concentration. The oysters we saw are concentrated. So what happens, they get more concentrated, the kidneys become compromised, maybe because you're dehydrated for in the very least, you're dehydrated, you're compromised in your ability to remove it, and it starts accumulating in your most distal parts of your body, the coldest parts of your body, if you will. Hence the bunion area, or the first metatarsal joint. From the New York Times, 2020, and November 14th. Once the disease of gluttonous aristocrats, gout is now tormenting the masses. And, you know, from the 1960s to the 1990s, the number of sufferers from gout, which means increase in uric acid, more than doubled in the US. And you could say in the rest of the world. I just stopped it there, and continue to rise. It's a big, big deal. So several risk factors were studied. Alcohol consumption. By the way, I like alcohol too, so I'm not like, hey, you're bad if you're having alcohol, but it's one of the things that needs to be talked about. Increased risk of incident gouts, especially beer and hard liquor. You notice there's wines in the middle there. So dry farm wines would probably be the least, or dry wines, let me say, dry wines. We have dry farm wines, but dry wines, which means they're very low on sugar and they're gone to complete fermentation, are the least offending. So dietary factors that increase the risk of gout. Meat intake, talked about that. Seafood intake, concentration of purines, right? Sweetened, sugared soft drinks, consumption of foods high in fructose, dairy intake. Folate in coffee, well, coffee. Folate in coffee tend to be associated with lower intakes. Okay, here's the goods on coffee. Coffee, if you're a coffee drinker like me, and you can kind of plod along and you have your predictable next cup of coffee by a certain time of the day, that's fine. It's kind of like a medication. And when you look at uric acid and caffeine, they're almost identical molecules. Seriously, they're almost identical molecules. I covered that on a previous video. And so if you take that and you've done this for weeks and months, it's just your constitution, it's what you do, fine, it's actually going to be preventative. But if you go, you know, you had 4 cups of coffee at a time in which you hardly have any coffee, and you really ramped it up, that sudden change that your kidneys have to address, they're not going to address it. And so you throw yourself into a temporary could be a day or two, higher risk of higher uric acid. So it goes both ways. Folate is fine. Folate's actually back to about homocysteine. It's one of those methylating factors, right? So, hate to be blunt, but these are the high purine foods. They show wine. I wish they didn't show wine. Alcohol, soft drinks, seafood, and liver. Things that are preventative, and I didn't cover it here, but it's worth mentioning, it's covered a lot elsewhere, is your omega-3s. If you have, in the seafood things, if you have things like salmon, so seafood that is high in omega-3s, right? High in omega-3s, low in omega-6s. It's the seafood, so salmon is really the king of that pile, that is really most effective. If you can't have salmon, and there is a difference here, if you just take omega-3s fish oils, well, that's better than nothing, and it will help your ratio. But oddly, having fish, the natural form of having omega-3s, is far more effective. So really anything that lowers your homocysteine, methylating factors, which would be for most people the methylating factors, folate, B12, choline, betaine, and SAMe, and prevents dehydration. So water. When in doubt, drink water on a regular basis. Most people don't think about drinking water, and so they edge closer. So when you add up some of these little factors, little dehydrated here, they take some aspirin there, they have a can of sardines there, all these things start to add up, but they don't have to. All right, uric acid formation, to break down what I've just told you about, your purines go up, your diet, your soft drinks, your beer, your sardines, so they create a great bolus, if you will, of purines that come down this way. And if you're dehydrated, that's reducing your ability to get rid of this. So reducing your ability to get rid of this, some things prevent this last step, which is called xanthine oxidase. And medications come on here that are targeted for gout in particular, we're talking about now, to increase xanthine oxidase or to increase your ability to urinate, get rid of. Okay, so how to measure your uric acid with glucose, ketones, and cholesterol. Now I'm going to show you how Judi and I have used this meter on ourselves. So we did 9 days. I'm just going to show you one day when we're taking our tests on ourselves, and then I'll go over the results on this. Okay, so here we are back at day 2 testing the FORA 6 that does the glucose, ketones, cholesterol, and uric acid. And why do I think it's a big deal? Because you have a context to compare all these together. It's very efficient, and it's very similar to other methods that you basically have a strip, you put it in, but this goes onto your phone as well in terms of transferring information. We'll get to that later. I've tried to do this on a 1-finger stick for all 4, and it's not always successful. So my backup is first 1 finger, then another. So this is the same time every day. We are at about 9:15. Yesterday we worked out. Today we haven't done anything. Haven't eaten anything. We had some coffee, but that was about it. Okay then. We're waiting for that drop of blood. That's a big deal. I've been in a rush a number of times and didn't wait for that, and that's how you waste your strips, which, considering that's the thing. So I'm 111, 111.
I was 111 also.
Yeah, so that could be dawn effect, who knows. Now for ketones, wait for the blood. Wait for the blood, okay, we got that. That was enough. I think I'm gonna have to go to another finger for the next 2. And that is on ketones, probably 0.1. Oh, 0.2.
I had 0.2 as well.
Uh-huh.
But also, the longer your keto, the lower your ketones will be, especially in the morning.
Yep. So that's why it's important to have an objective. Why are you doing keto if you're doing keto? So just being ketones and so on and so forth.
I did it all on 1 finger prick. Woo-hoo-hoo.
Oh, aren't you special?
Yes.
My drop of blood tends to go around to the back of my finger. All right. Easy out. Put the sucker in. Wait for the drop of blood. Okay, good to go. This is uric acid. So my uric acid is 6.9. So it's higher today than it was yesterday after working out. So these are the things you can write down, the context of your numbers. Men are higher than women. I generally don't want to be over 6, certainly not 7, but I've been as low as 4. And now the last is cholesterol, which I'm really not that interested in. Cholesterol varies a lot, and it's really only fasting cholesterol is what you compare it to. So this morning would be considered fasting, by the way. Waiting. Okay. $212. $212 is like, who cares? It's a good number if I was really concerned about it. I'm not concerned about it. If it was 300, not that worried either.
So my glucose is 111, ketones 0.2, UA 3.3, and my cholesterol is 279, which is the highest it's been since I've tracked it with this. But I have high cholesterol anyway.
Well, yeah, when you compare it to yesterday, so we worked out yesterday and she had 140. That's a dramatic difference. So it varies so much with cholesterol that you really have to contextualize it. What were you doing? And, immediately before the blood draw. Same here. So we'll see tomorrow what that's going to be. And this is sort of the pattern. I do it primarily because this puts uric acid in context of those other 3 varieties. So I'm not that interested in cholesterol, but it helps to sort of see, is there any correlation? The glucose and the ketones likewise. Till then. Okay, so now you saw that how we did that on a regular basis. That was day 8 or 9 or something, nearly towards the end. It was pretty interesting. It was much more interesting than I thought it would be. I've done Keto Mojo for the last 4 years. I've stopped doing any sort of finger prick measurements really for the last year and a half. Just I knew what I knew. I learned what I needed to know. And this is far better than a glucometer. I mean, this is a glucometer, a ketometer, a uric acid meter, and cholesterol monitor. I mean, you could use them individually for that. So it's one thing that suits all 4, which is amazing, right? So you have 4 reasons to use it. Or if you want to do them all together, you get the context of how important this is. And I think that's extreme. So here's Judi's results. So we go down here and we put there's a little context. And this is why you do it this way. I made a little spreadsheet here. And this also is put on your phone. You can see your data on your phone and the graphs and all these wonderful things, but I'm not going to go into that. So here we go. We started out. And these little NAs is when she or I botched up and either didn't wait for that blood drop to show up when we stuck in the slip too soon. So that's unfortunate. So we missed out on that. So here we go. We started. Here's her glucose. Here's her ketones, her uric acid, and her cholesterol. And so these are the different things. After high intensity interval training, which we do some cardiovascular on our living room floor, that will last roughly about a half hour. Then we get up and did this. This was after 2 cups of coffee, no particular exercise. And so you get to see the context after another 2 cups of coffee only, not a day of exercise. This is going into the gym to do high intensity training with slow weight resistance training. And you can see what a difference that makes. All in all, look at her uric acid here is about 2. And then for whatever reason, it doubles to about 4. I don't have any explanation on that other than, she'll have to go back and look at her notes and see what she did. But when you start lining them up, you get to say, if we had another 10 or 20 of these, you get to sort of see how important uric acid is. So uric acid does it make sense that it increases after the gym? Absolutely, because you've forced yourself into a glycemic situation. You force yourself to produce glucose, to open up your glycogen stores from your liver, and so your glucose goes up because you needed that energy. You pushed yourself that fast, and so when you do that, you're going to see your glucose go up. So here's a day after HIIT. The other thing about HIIT, it's in the living room, and so it's like 10 minutes away from the meter as opposed to the gym, which we have to drive, a half hour away to come back. So you've kind of already started to cool down. So you can see that effect. No workout, it's 110. So no workout, only morning coffee, 110. That's interesting. There's her cholesterol. Here's another morning after high intensity training. So her cholesterol was higher. Her glucose was 105. And so there you go. So now let's go look at Carl's. Carl's is more or less pretty similar. Sometimes they take vitamin C. Vitamin C is pretty dicey. So if you're going to measure yourself for the glucose in particular, do not take vitamin C. Most animals, it's only some mammals now, can make their own glucose from vitamin C. So they can take in their own vitamin C from glucose, just the opposite. Well, we can't do that, but it's close enough molecule that the meters get confused. And so they see vitamin C and glucose as the same. So be careful. Don't do what I did on these particular. I remembered it and to stop doing it. So here's my glucose. My glucose is pretty darn even, huh? 108, 106. It was higher after exercise. No workout. Well, there was lower after exercise. Who knows what the night before was? And you think, well, did I have wine the night before? Did I not have anything the night before? And here's my cholesterol that ranged from 220, roughly, here's 205, and my high was 310. So when you put Judy's and myself next to each other, here's one fasting day in which we didn't go to the gym. We finished dinner about 6. We then wake up about 4:30, had hot water, and then no exercise. And so at 6 o'clock, 6:15, we took this measure. And our numbers are almost exactly the same, 109 to 109, 310 to 311. That's kind of amazing, except for that her uric acid is half of mine. My ketones are a little bit higher. But you can start to find more and more insights. I would love this to be 20, 30, 50 numbers long, and then you can start to even run programs to find out what these correlations with. Again, if you're coming from the world of looking at your weight or insulin resistance or obesity or diabetes, insulin is pretty much right on par with uric acid numbers. So this is what it looks like on the phone. Skip these numbers here. They're all the wrong days and times because I didn't even think about setting it up. So, but it all accumulates. This is just your uric. So there's your, this is uric acid numbers. There's your ketones, your total cholesterol, and your blood glucose. And so you flip through these. It puts them all together on a graph. You can look at all the different graphs. Here's all the different links of how to get started, diabetes. It's just very, very helpful. It's so spectacular to have this context. It's not just a uric acid meter, it's all these things. And I really think for those that are afraid to go and get your labs, or you don't have a doctor to work with, or whatever else, get this, start knowing this. This is a big piece of information to know. And so for instance, on your Bluetooth phone, you can connect directly to, and has these little videos of, if you've never done a blood test, shows you how to do that, performing a glucose test, a ketone test, activate your Bluetooth pairing in your phone, data from your meter, setting glucose, and same with your uric acid and your cholesterol. It's just very, very helpful. And they have Facebook groups and YouTube videos. So it's just extraordinary. It's such a nice high piece of technology. They give you a kit like this, and you've seen what it looks like. It's just, it's nice. I was really in love with the Keto Mojo for a number of years. It was the only thing around. This goes far beyond that. You can calculate, it calculates for you your glucose ketone index if that's what you're interested in. So that's what it looks like. And that's the phone. I think it's just spectacular. I hope you'll think of getting it for yourself. And I hope you'll consider getting it through us. Help our site. This is your 10% discount code, so it will help you. But whatever you do, now that you know why you want to measure your glucose, what factors affect your glucose, how to measure your uric acid, how to measure your uric acid, please do this and just take charge of your health. Till next time. So if this is something that you're interested in, that is a topic that I obviously go deeper in terms of labs, in terms of how to do it, in terms of why you would want to do it, various topics, as you've seen that I've done in the past, then please let me know below in a comment. Till then.